Welcome to another edition of Believe in Giants. Yeah, it's been a while. Bob Papa, two-time Super Bowl champion Carl Banks. Little dust settling here. And Carl, the last time you and I reconvened, we were doing a post-mortem on the season and what was next for the Giants. And then Giants head coach Joe Judge got fired. So complete sweep. And now the Giants have a new general manager in Joe Schoen from the Buffalo Bills, who comes very highly recommended in a lot of NFL circles. I don't know him personally. I don't know if you know him personally. But I'm excited to see this new chapter of Giants football.
I am too. And I am so happy that they have someone who's learned football at every stage of it. You know, this is a guy that started out in a ticket office and just worked his way up. He's got great Parcells stories to tell. He was Brandon Beane's right hand. And, you know, when it comes to performing an autopsy and you just look at what Buffalo has done in the 4 years that Brandon Beane was there, and he's been, I'm going to, and we'll have someone to talk about this, but I'm going to assume that being that in that proximity to Brandon Beane, and you listen to Brandon Beane talk about the collaboration, that he has had a formative influence on Joe Schoen's process. Let's just say that.
Yeah, and now he's got to put together he's got to find a head coach. He's got to put together his staff, just like he was a key component to the Buffalo Bills process. He's going to have to create his own team. A lot of work to do. So let's welcome in a guest that you're excited to have on the program here. He's been covering the Buffalo Bills for a long time. You can follow him on Twitter at WUFO Sports. Muki Hawkins joins us here on Believe in Giants podcast with Bob Pop and Carl Banks. And we're going to get Muki up in just a second, and we're going to be fired up and ready to go. So there he is, Muki Hawkins. He's been covering the NFL and the Buffalo Bills for a long time. Muki, Bob Papa, Carl Banks, welcome to Believe in Giants, our little fun podcast here. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about what the Giants are getting in Joe Schoen.
First of all, good morning, gentlemen. And what the Giants are getting in Joe Schoen, actually, you're getting Brandon Beane's Tommy Bellotti. All right, you're getting the underboss. You're getting the guy who has the blueprint, that know how to, change the shape of organizations. And, it stretches all the way back to, when Joe Schoen was the director of player personnel and a scout for the Miami Dolphins. But, with the way they were able to reshape this Bills organization in such a short period of time, which is basically unheard of, they did it with great drafting, and they did it with great development of players, and having a key eye for, bringing in the right free agents, guys such as Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Cole Beasley, Mitch Morris, and obviously Stephon Diggs. So, just a phenomenal job by Joe Schoen, and Giants fans, you should be very excited about this hire.
Mookie, one of the things that I noticed, and we touched on it a little bit last night, is that the Buffalo Bills have in Brandon Beane's 4 years, every draft choice is still on the roster. I mean, maybe with the exception of maybe two. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that the Giants have never been able to do, is retain their own players. And so that whole methodology in terms of building, we always talk about culture so much, right? Mm-hmm. And I played in an era where there wasn't a lot of transition, so you could have a stable culture. But one way to create a culture is, like, if you like a guy and you draft a guy, it would make sense to be able to keep him. But the Giants have been in salary cap hell for a very long time, and they missed on some guys. But just the fact that that's a philosophy of, we're going to keep we're going to try to get our guys re-signed. Talk a little bit about what that has done in terms of helping McDermott you talk about turning the thing around. He got it up and running pretty quick.
Yeah, and that's the plan, man. The plan is basically to get rid of that cap space, and gain capital draft, and basically find a franchise quarterback. And Giants definitely have some of those pieces already intact. We just have to figure out, is it to be in this up and coming year? But at one point, the Buffalo Bills had over 70 million in dead cap space in 2018, and that's the only season the Bills didn't go to the playoffs. They finished 6-10, with that regard. But they were able to reset that cap space in 2020 up to 82 million. Okay, well, which enabled them to sign, their draft picks and extend those very free agents that you're talking about. So Joe's going to come in and patiently build this Giants organization his way, because this is the same recipe that worked for the Bills organization.
What is going to be the key for Joe Schoen? Because Brandon Beane talked about, the team and working collaboratively. He's going to have to build his own team, and he's not going to be able to take all the guys from Buffalo with him. What is the most important thing for Joe Schoen as far as building his inner circle?
Well, I mean, learning from Brandon Beane and, the rest of the Bills organization and staff, he's going to take those same, things that it's kind of like you having a big brother, right? You always learn from your big brother. You always learn from the do's and don'ts to say, okay, this was a mistake that, Brandon made. I'm not going to make that same mistake going to, the Giants in retrospect. So he's going to find those type of guys, and I'm quite sure he can identify who those guys are already. And, they're going to go in with those same philosophies that worked in Buffalo, and they're going to stick to those same philosophies. And, you're going to see some things. Giants fans just have to be patient. It's not, Rome wasn't built in a day, but, he's going to come in, with some great philosophies and some great structure, and, pretty much change that culture to the point where Giants fans are going to love the result at the end.
Okay, so he's got to pick coaches, right? And again, here in New York, we don't know what we don't know about Joe Schoen. We're kind of living vicariously through Brandon Beane because he was in close proximity, and they talk about the collaboration. But he's got coaches, and he's got to pick coaches. And one thing that I got from the presser post-draft, I went all the way back to last year's draft and listened to Brandon Beane talk about how they acquired players and how he talked to Coach McDermott, he talked to Daboll, he talked to Frazier, and he wanted to get players that fit into their system. And he talked about a lot of things he liked, but he says, I had to talk with my coaches to make sure that we got the right players. And he talked about cornerbacks. Leslie likes corners who tackle. He said, you can find a lot of cover guys, but they wanted guys they had a priority on cornerbacks who could tackle. And then he talked about Brian Daboll and how he wanted to build his offensive line. Not every offensive lineman is built the same. So it is particular to what those what those coaches want, more so than saying, well, this offensive tackle is great. And if Brian Daboll says, well, he can't set the way he don't have the feet that we want him to, he could be a great lineman. Will that be some of the collaboration that we can expect from Joe Schoen?
Oh, yes, it's definitely going to be a collaborative effort. When you look at the chemistry that Coach McDermott and Brandon Beane had all the way back from Carolina. Basically he was handpicked by McDermott because obviously the trust is there. He know that Brandon Beane identifies the type of players that he likes and knows what's comfortable within that scheme that the Bills run. The same thing that they did out in Carolina. So that type of, chemistry, that type of continuity makes it easier from a front office standpoint to trust those guys to go out there and bring in that necessary talent that the coaches covet. And, when you look at it, drafting guys like Trey White was McDermott's very first pick in 2017. You look at drafting Deion Dawkins, Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, Ed Oliver, Dawson Knox. Okay, you bring in free agents like I said before, Poyer, Hyde, Beasley. Those guys you put around your quarterback, seasoned veteran guys that's going to help your quarterback grow and make plays for and build his confidence. So it's a collaborative effort, and he's not going to be, oh, I'm the general manager. I like this guy, you deal with it. They're not those type of guys. They're football guys, and they understand what the coaches want, and they're going to bring those guys in that fit their scheme. It makes the process just more easier. You know what I mean? So it's not going to be a struggle between front office and coaching staff. And I think that's just so key to the Bills' success, thus far.
Listen, they've already interviewed Brian Daboll and Leslie Frazier, right? They got a couple interviews out of the way right out of the gate.
Formality. That was a formality, right? Yeah, I think they really had the interview kind of like 2 weeks ago. It was just probably like a 2-second phone call, like, hey, it's Brian, you there? Yeah, this is Joe. How you doing? Yeah, hey. Tell the kids I said hello and then hang up.
Do you think that Brian Daboll's the guy that he wants to bring to the Giants? Because Brian Daboll's going to get a job.
I believe so. I believe so. I mean, the bond between those two are there. It goes all the way back to when Daboll was an offensive coordinator in Miami, where Shane was a scout and director of player personnel. So the familiarity is already there between the two. And I think for Daboll, it's more of a better fit for him because he's a New York guy. He's born and raised right here at St. Francis High School. So how ironic is that? You get an opportunity to coach a team that you pretty much was admiring as a high schooler when the Bills were going to Super Bowls back in the early 90s. You were at a high school right around the corner, just living the dream. So it's a perfect fit. He doesn't really have to try to move his family too quick, so I think it's more or less Daboll. And what he's done with Josh Allen, is something that the Giants are looking for in reference to their young quarterback in Daniel Jones. Is he that franchise quarterback? Before we think about extending him or exercising options or of that nature, the pieces are in place for Daboll to come in and, pretty much do what he did here with Josh Allen. So I think Daboll obviously is pretty much a unanimous choice. I don't think that Joe Schoen is going to bring somebody outside of that culture, because it's just going to be a struggle. The familiarity is already there, even with Coach Frazier, but it depends on what they're looking for. And I more so think that, the Giants need offensive help. They need help in both ways, but they desperately need some points scored, obviously, or what the Giants went through offensively last year.
They need structure, Muki. There was no structure to this offense whatsoever. And it never entered the 21st century. This offense I don't think it would have been successful in the 80s. So let me ask this question, and we're going to play a little make-believe now, because if Daboll is where you think Joe's going to look, and there's some decisions that got to be made on the quarterback. We know that the draft is not ripe with quarterback talent this year. So Daniel Jones does not lack talent. I think he lacks consistency. But one thing that will bring out the best in the player, and you'll know whether you got one or not, is competition. Competition that will not somebody that's competing to be a backup, right? If you need to find out about a guy, right? Then you put somebody in there who can compete with him. Do you have anybody that you can think of that could do that if Daboll's coach?
Oh, without a doubt. And that's the thing about the Buffalo Bills. They built this roster based upon just those very words you said, competition, and one thing I could say about how the Bills draft, they do an excellent job of what I like to call the meat and potato rounds, those 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds, guys who can come in and make an immediate impact, maybe push a starter for his position, and, build quality depth along the way, while that guy is taking that spot somewhere down the line.
So is there a free agent out there that could push Daniel Jones, or is there anybody that?
Obviously, we definitely know there's a guy out there, and if Daboll is pretty much the offense or the head coach, then look for Mitch Trubisky to go along with him to be that insurance policy, just in case things don't work out too well with Daniel Jones in reference to him picking up the scheme. Trubisky is a guy, once again, who's familiar with Coach Daboll's scheme. He knows what he's looking for. And, he's a seasoned guy too, a former 1st-round pick, that really wasn't properly developed, So here it is. He can bring that guy in, someone that's going to push Daniel Jones to be good, but help him.
He's going to push to be. He'll push to be the starter.
Yeah, he's going to
not just to push Daniel to be good, but push to be the starter, right?
Yes, he's definitely going to push him to be starting. Trubisky is not coming in to be a backup. I mean, he did that for 1 year here in Buffalo, but he's not coming in to be a backup. He's definitely going to come in and push Daniel Jones, and we're going to see what Daniel Jones is definitely made of. But he has the tools. He has the tools. I mean, he's mobile with his legs. He's kind of accurate with his arm. So he's definitely going to bring Mitch Trubisky in if that's the case. If he's the head coach, I would say that Mitch Trubisky would definitely be that guy. Another guy that, I know that, Brandon Beane said that, all the coaches is intact and they're not going to, take guys from that. I would say a guy by the name of Shane Turney, who's the assistant quarterbacks coach, who has familiarity with Daboll back at Alabama. I think that, maybe he can probably be that offensive coordinator for Brian Daboll, another guy that's familiar with the scheme, another guy who's dealt with Josh Allen hands-on. And, so that would be a name that could be a potential offensive coordinator if Daboll were to be the head coach for the New York Giants. And then
what if it isn't Daboll? What if it isn't Daboll?
What if it's Leslie Frazier? If it's Leslie Frazier, then hey, you got a guy in here that's, basically coming in with the number one defense in the NFL. You got great guys on that back end as far as secondary. You look at the Giants draft, they drafted a lot of, good secondary guys. You got my godson, which is Darnay Holmes on the team. So that's a good cock piece right there to begin with and go along with the other guys on the back end. They depend a lot on their front four to get pressure. So, that would probably be a point of emphasis if Leslie Frazier was, become the head coach, because they allow on those four-man pressures. And like Carl said, they like guys that can tackle, guys that can cover and guys that can tackle, get you off the field on third down. Like, just say, for instance, if it's a 3rd and 12 situation, they're going to force you to throw that ball underneath, and those guys are going to rally to the ball and make the tackle and get your offense off the field. So, it's a two-edged sword, but I kind of like this two-edged sword. It's a great poison to pick,
Well, Muki, I appreciate you jumping on, man. This has been very insightful. Again, we've heard a lot of things and everybody just kind of guesses around it. And you've been a part of the Buffalo fabric and understand this team better than anybody, and has spent a lot of time with players and have great relationships with the coaches. So we really appreciate you jumping in and just we can only live vicariously through Brandon Beane and those who are close to him that know the thinking of this Buffalo Bills success. And this is a reclamation project. This is not one that's you're gonna have a lot of years to do it. You may not even have a gap year this year. So he's got to look at this roster, see what he wants to keep and build around it, because it's not going to be another 2-year, 3-year cycle. It's got to be, let's hit the ground running. How do we do that? And then build from there. So picking the right coach, they've got the right guy at general manager, and we're all excited here, and this has been really insightful.
Right, man. Hey, the recipe: drafting and developing your guys. And the Bills have done a good job of developing those guys and drafting guys in the meat and potato round, such as Tyler Bass, Gabriel Davis, Wyatt Teller, all right, was drafted by the Bills in the 5th round, who they traded as draft capital. Look at Wyatt Teller now. He's one of the top linemen in the league. Matt Milano, look at how he's playing, 5th round draft pick. Dawson Knox, he leads all tight ends with touchdowns right now. He was a 3rd, 4th round pick. Levi Wallace, who's been opposite of Tre'Davious White for the past 4 years, who was an undrafted free agent. So those guys do a phenomenal job of identifying what works for their scheme and having a key eye for the talent to bring in to make that system work. So Joe will come in and he will patiently build this Giants organization, his way, because once again, it's the same recipe that worked in Buffalo, man. So just have some patience, trust the process, part 2. And, hopefully we can look for some great things coming out of New York with what Joe Schoen is about to bring in.
Awesome.
Muki, where can Giants fans who are not as familiar with your work, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter. I am Wuffle Sports, and that's WUFO Sports on Twitter. You can also find me on Instagram at 14180 Muki. That's Muki. And obviously, you know, on Facebook, Muki Hawkins.
Appreciate it, Muki. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mook.
Thank you guys for having me. See you soon.
And Steve said hello.
Hey, my man Steve, man, tell him, man, hey, tell him to give me a buzz.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yes, sir.
All right, enjoy the game tomorrow.
This should be a good one.
Bills are going to win that game.
I think so too.
Bills are definitely going to win that game. They're so locked in. They're just so locked in. They just can't wait for this game to prove to everybody that they're the better team. And I don't know if it's just a maturation process or just mentally evolved that way. But you know, they've been as far as the AFC Championship game, so they know what it takes. They know not to get too high, not to get too low. They know what's at stake, and they know their opponent quite well. So it's going to be, you know, a true test. It's going to be a challenge, but you know, they're coming in and they're going to play aggressive, and they're a different team from week 5 that actually won.
Yeah.
So they're playing way more aggressive on defense. But Leslie Frazier is doing a good job of adjusting, understanding his team's strengths late in the season and altering some things that they normally don't do, you know, which is mixing it up, you know, forcing the action a little bit more than usual. And, you know, they're starting to see the results there. And on the offensive side, the Bills are starting to get that balance in the run game. And that's scary when you look at a team that was, you know, still ranked as one of the top scoring teams with inconsistencies on that offense. Now look at the past 4 games with Devin Singletary running the ball. If they can keep that balance and keep Kansas City off balance with balance, it's going to be a long day in Arrowhead tomorrow.
Yeah.
Muki, thank you so much, man. Enjoy it.
Yes, sir. Be well, guys.
Man.
All right, Carl. Well, it was a good conversation there with Muki, and good call on your part to get him on the show. We got a lot of insight. Do you sense, or do you think that no matter who the Giants interview, that they're going to go in that direction? Joe Schoen's going to go in that direction?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that can be the case because keep in mind, Buffalo can always make an offer that Brian Daboll can't refuse. You know, they can, you know, there have been a lot of hot candidates that decided, you know, I like it here. I grew up here, and boy, they just made me a big fat offer, and I'm assistant head coach, and I'm making a lot of money. So sometimes you never know. You never know. I'm sure when you talk about, you know, coaches, general managers, especially when they're new at it, they like to bring a few guys in that they have familiarity with. And there's a lot of trust. There's a lot of success that Brian Daboll has that they've had together. But I don't think it's a lock, but it wouldn't shock me, and I wouldn't be disappointed if he were the Giants head coach.
You know, he's got good pedigree. There's a lot of people that I respect that are big fans of him and what he does offensively. I guess we'll see. They're going to go through the whole interview process. There's plenty of quality candidates out there.
Yeah, those two guys, like Muki said, those two guys have probably been talking about the what if scenario for a while. Right. You know, in some of their meetings or their beers together amongst the boys. I like the fact that the process that I truly believe have been influenced in the Bills, he will apply in his evaluation of talent and acquisition of talent for the Giants. I do like that. I do want to know who the coach is. That needs to probably be done in another week or so, huh?
I would think so. Now, let's face it, if he's seriously interested in bringing in one of the coordinators from Buffalo, I mean, they could win. They could win this week, and they could be in the conference championship game next week.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they could get to the Super Bowl, and you wouldn't have access to them for weeks.
Well, they had the first interview already, so you do get another one prior to the Super Bowl. If they didn't get this one, they wouldn't have it until after the Super Bowl. So,
yeah, I mean, listen, if you know that that's the guy you're going to want, and you go through this whole interview process, I mean, let's face it, with texting, technology, Zooming, or whatever, you can start to work on next while you're working on now.
Sure. You're absolutely right. But I'm not sure he's sure. I think one thing that Brandon Beane said about him is that he wants the answers to the test before he walks into the classroom. So I think he wants to be sure he's sure, but there is a risk when, you start to interview a lot of folks, the guy you want may get away unless they know. I mean, listen, I don't think anybody wants to be put on hold just to be told, I'm going to go in a different direction. You know what I mean? If he says, hold off, I just want to interview a few guys, but you're my guy, that's that. But if it's, I'm not sure yet, and he wants to be sure he's sure, and there are some very qualified candidates. And you do need a coach that has a vision for your team, not just one that you're familiar with that has a vision for what he's currently doing. Will that vision fit within what your new challenge is? That's the other thing.
What did you think about the Giants GM hiring process? I thought it was pretty cool with the way they did it. They cast a pretty wide net, and they certainly brought in a lot of different people from a lot of different organizations. Thorough would be a very appropriate word for it.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too. They didn't go with the traditional thinking. They didn't go with the established thinking. All of these guys that they were interviewing were relatively young. They were in their 40s.
Yeah.
So they wanted a new thought leader in their scouting and personnel area, which is great because now it breaks all, when there was so much talk about, it's always the same old thing with the Giants and they can never get out of their own way. Well, they got a fresh set of eyes, a fresh set of ideas, and a fresh approach. And so there's nothing that says that, well, the Giants are getting in their own way because they brought someone in that clearly did not have ties to the organization, but also he comes in with a fresh perspective. He's a younger gentleman.
All right. So Carl, the last podcast we did with the Biz, as of that recording, Joe Judge was still the head coach of the Giants, right? I'm at the airport on my way out of town and the phone starts buzzing. Giants made a move. We both like Coach Judge in our dealings with him. But when you think about like business, the Giants had to make this move because, right, like you're talking about, they brought in a general manager with fresh ideas. They interviewed a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds that have come from different places, that were groomed in different places and were influenced by different people. I think it would have been really hard if you're bringing in a new general manager who has their vision, right? That they talked about the interview process and the quotes from John Mara and Steve Tisch, collaborative, moving us forward, in charge of the entire football operation. How do you really gain that footing if there was somebody already there? Meaning the coach, it would have been hard.
It would have been very hard if you were being true to what you say this new direction would be. It would be virtually impossible, right? Because Joe Judge is a whole different type of guy. He's a guy that didn't even think you needed a general manager. He thought he could do it all. So you bring in a guy who has a fresh set of ideas, it wouldn't have worked. The only way Joe Judge would have been able to stay there is if they would have stayed in-house with someone like a Kevin Abrams or someone who's a junior guy who they put in the position, and Joe Judge is the guy who's kind of pulling the strings on what he wants. Now, I am 100% in support of this direction that they're taking the team, because we all get prisoner of the moment and we all have our sentiments towards certain things, but sometimes you just rip the Band-Aid off and you start new. I literally just did that in my business in a similar situation. And you just look at it and you say, you had ownership of this particular part of my business and you failed to get it done. I can't give you any more resources. I need a fresh set of eyes. I need a fresh set of business skills. So we're changing direction. And that it happens. You know, again, you can like a person a lot. You can like a lot about what they do. But when you're in a results-oriented business, and I get a bigger sample size than 17 games. You know, I get 12 to 18 months and then some. But this is, I think it's the right thing to do. I really do. And I'm excited that Joe Schoen is there, and I'm excited to see what he brings, the approach. You know, I didn't hear a lot about analytics, but I'm sure it's going to factor in because he's a younger guy. But, you know, you give coaches the information they need, and then they use it the way they should. And if it's any indication of what you see from Sean McDermott and his crew, and even Brian Daboll, it doesn't look like they're driven by analytics. They're driven by what's on the ground, what they see.
Sure.
I'm sure they use it. Everybody uses it, but.
So, I mean, it's hard to do a roster autopsy right now because we don't know. We have to find out who the coaches are, right? I mean, once we find out who the head coach is, who the DC is, who the OC is, the offensive line coach, once we have an idea of that, then we can kind of figure out like who has a probability of staying, who has a probability of going. But one thing that you had sent me this last night, a Brandon Beane interview after last year's draft. And, the one thing that was very refreshing is, they're committed to the philosophy is you got to win up front. You got to win up front and creating competition and quality on the offensive and defensive lines is imperative if you want to win in the league.
Yeah, and the one thing that stuck out to me when he was talking about both lines, he says, look, the NFL passing 10 years ago is not passing today. There's a lot more passing in the league. He says, but no matter how it changes, games are won on both lines, both sides of the line of scrimmage. Good offensive line, good defensive line. So we know that is going to be a priority. But, when you do your game charts, right, you have certain things highlighted that you want to get to. Sure. I'm sure Joe Schoen, he doesn't know how the autopsy is going to look, but he sees a few things that he's going to have to address fast.
Yeah,
that
like
is
the offensive line.
Offensive line, that's highlighted, right? Running back contract, right? Will the new coach value a back who can do a lot of things and not just have to be relied on to run the football? And then is there a value in the guy that you have? Things like that, I'm sure he's highlighting. And then the rest of it is just core stuff.
Edge rusher, all that, those things that they have to continue to improve upon.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Any other thoughts about this? I mean, I feel like, until they hire a head coach, it's a little bit of a wait and see to see what direction they're going to go. But I think it was a very refreshing process to watch it all happen. And like, I can't sit here. Like I watched some of the stuff on social media and in the media of people talking about, I really want this guy. I really want that guy. Like, I don't know any of these guys.
That's what I said. We don't know what we don't know. And that's why I had a call in to Muki to see if he could join us, because at least we have somebody that has familiarity with the new general manager. He's lived in that area his whole life. But it's kind of like we have to live vicariously through the proximity of those who worked. And because he was the right-hand man of Brandon Beane, I'm pretty sure he's had a formative influence on how he does things. But all the rest of this coach stuff, you know what? We don't know what we don't know.
Right. And let's not fake being experts on it.
Right.
Hey, what about these games this weekend? You got any? Is there any one of them that you're really fired up about?
I'm. You know what? I am fired up about the Kansas City and Buffalo game, but I believe Buffalo's going to beat them. And I'm going to say this, fans, don't be shocked if Kansas City comes in and they look like they had a letdown, because they scored a lot of points on a bad team. No shade to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they knew, right? Yeah, Pittsburgh said, you know, this is what it is. We're happy to be here. We're going to hope they make a bunch of mistakes, right? So they're playing sandlot by the end of the game. Everybody gets a chance to throw or catch a touchdown, right? Buffalo had to actually prepare for a really tough football team, and they took a tough football team and beat the brakes off of them. So if Kansas City is going to come in and they're going to feel really confident, I believe it's false bravado. And I think the world of the Kansas City Chiefs, but if they come in this thing thinking they can play like they played against Pittsburgh, you're going to look at what appears to be a letdown, because they will not be leveled up to what's going to happen when they face the Buffalo Bills. They have to be 3 times better than they were against. I mean, they probably practiced harder against themselves than what Pittsburgh gave them.
The other one that I'm intrigued by, the Rams.
Yeah.
You know, how do you pick a Stafford-led team over a Brady-led team? I mean, you know, are we going to get good Stafford, or are we going to get mistake Stafford? But I know this: styles make fights. Mm-hmm. Common phrase used in boxing. The Rams, without Stafford, in 2020 went down to Tampa and beat the Bucs, and the Rams beat the Bucs this season. They match up, for whatever the reason is. They match up pretty well with the Bucs, and without Godwin, and I know the Rams are down safeties, but if these offensive linemen, even if they can go, but they're banged up and they're limited, that's the strength of this Rams team.
Yeah. The style makes fight thing, but here's the other thing too. We've seen in boxing rematches, and we've seen trilogies, right? And the one thing that we do know, that if you get Tampa Bay in a trilogy, it won't be anything like the first 2 fights, because they're gonna here's where I believe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can have an advantage, is if they play the game on their terms. If they make it a boring game, and they just, you can't take a lot of risk with your defense. You just say, hey, Stafford, go down and make a bunch of plays, and I bet we get an interception. Because if we give you 10 plays to get to a touchdown, 2 of those 10 are going to be turnover opportunities.
Right.
It's just what it is. Max protect, get your tight ends involved. If you're Tampa, tight ends out, tight ends block, tight ends leak. Just make it as boring and play the game on your terms, and see if the Rams lose interest and give up a big play, because they can do that sometimes too.
Yep. Tennessee. I don't
Tennessee,
know.
Cincinnati is a pick 'em.
Yeah. I mean, well, it'd be interesting to see exactly what Henry how much they actually use him.
Yeah.
And the key is to not forget that how you got there was you got there with not having them. Don't forget about the guys that you got you there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you have to put enough pressure on Cincinnati with your run game. They have a quarterback who won't lose the game for him if he doesn't have to be put in positions to win it. Look, I don't think the stage is going to be the lights won't be too bright for Burrow. It won't be too bright for Chase. But I think, I just think this is a pick 'em. It really is.
Then you got the Niners going to Green Bay.
I'm excited about that one.
Well, the Niners, it's funny because I keep my Packers followers on Twitter. When I was doing my Sirius NFL radio show on Friday, they kept sending me like the weather forecast. I'm like, I got it. All right, it's going to be -3 or whatever. Well, guess what? The Niners are built to play that in that kind of weather. They're not a high-flying, high-wire act.
No.
They're a running physical football team. I just think that I think they sustained a couple of key injuries last week that may hurt them in this game.
Yeah, but I'm going to tell you what, the one thing that the 49ers have, they got a mindset, man. They have a mindset that is not in 2022. They got a 1980s, 1990s mindset. They're just punch you in the mouth. We're going to give you a lot of things to look at, but while we're doing all that, we're still punching you in the face. It is not one of those, we're going to finesse you. Everything we do, we're going to challenge your best players to make a play. So whoever up front is their best guy in Green Bay, believe me, he's not going to have his best day. They never let your best players have their best day. Look at what they did and Micah Parsons made a lot of plays in that game, but he had a lot of attention on him. And those the rest of the defensive linemen, they didn't impact the game like everybody thought they would.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, all I can see is Brandon Ayuk on a 3rd and 11 runs this great route. He's wide open.
And Jimmy G airmails it. And then late in the game, the only way the Cowboys could possibly have a chance is a turnover, right?
And he throws it. That's a terrible throw. So that has me worried about it. I think it's going to be fun. All right, you got anything else to get off your chest here? You got anything else?
No, man, this has been good. I know we don't like just jumping on podcasts to talk about nothing, but I thought, we could give a little insight to our fans and not a lot of guesswork or play fantasy, pick a coach, pick an owner, pick a GM. So I thought this was good when we have stuff to talk about like this and we can bring somebody on that can give us some insight. I like it. We'll have more to talk about probably in another week because there's going to be a head coach. And then after that, there's going to be a general manager. And then after that, there's going to be a draft. And we'll find out a lot about the philosophies.
Yeah, we're going to get a good feel. I want to thank Muki Hawkins for joining us. Carl, what do we tell a friend?
Tell a friend to tell a friend.
So for Carl Banks, I'm Bob Papa. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Believe in Giants. Tell a friend.